What's going on, guys? I want to make this video about something that's on everybody's mind with the rise of AI and everything. Is AI going to take over the jobs? Is the new CS grads, are they quote unquote cooked? Stuff like that. So I want to give you my 2 cents and the economic lessons in the past. Maybe we can extrapolate based off of this new technology. Now, I know AI is sort of the most transformative. I have been reading the book Origins of Efficiency, and it's by Brian Potter. I'll link it down in the description. It's I will try to extrapolate from this and give my own thoughts too. It has a lot of ideas on automation and the history behind it, so I will give you the insights of what I found in this book. Okay, so here's a question that sounds simple, but isn't. In 1900, 41% of Americans worked on farms. Today, it's less than 2%. That's 39% of the entire workforce gone. Eliminated, made obsolete by a machine. So where did all those people go? Did they starve? Did society collapse? Did we enter some permanent depression where 40% of the population just wandered around with nothing to do? No. Obviously not. But here's the weird part. We're having the exact same panic right now about AI. The exact same arguments, the exact same fears, and somehow we've completely forgotten what actually happened the last 15 times we went through this. So I want to walk through 3 stories: a tractor, a red flag, and a printing press, and by the end, I think you'll see why the debate we're having about artificial intelligence is almost entirely backwards. Let's start in 1900. If you were alive back then, your life was dominated by one thing: food. Not eating it, making it. Nearly half the country was dedicated to the basic act of growing enough calories to survive another day. And the technology powering this system: horses, mules, human muscle, about 22 million work animals across American farms. Now, the part people forget: a horse is basically a machine that never turns off. It eats whether it's working or not. So farmers had to dedicate something like a quarter of their land just to growing hay and oats to feed their tractors. They're biological tractors, which means every acre feeding a horse was an acre that couldn't feed a person. The economy had a hard ceiling, a thermodynamic trap, if you will. Then the gas-powered tractor showed up, and this wasn't some incremental improvement. This was a total discontinuity. Unlike a horse, an engine has no metabolic cost when it's idle. It runs on petroleum from underground, which means the surface, all that farmland, gets freed up to grow food for humans. Between 1910 and 1960, 24 million draft animals just vanished from the American landscape. Millions of acres opened up. And then the productivity shift. In 1800, producing 100 bushels of wheat took 300 hours of labor. Brutal, back-breaking work. By 1890, with horse-drawn equipment, you're down to maybe 50 hours. By the late 20th century, with GPS-guided combines, less than 3 hours. That's a 99% reduction in the labor cost of food. And that is why, in 2024, Americans spend only about 10% of their income on food. Compare that to 40% or more in the early 1900s. That difference, that surplus, is what funds everything else. Healthcare, entertainment, education, electronics. The entire modern economy exists because the tractor freed up capital that used to be locked in food production. So what happened to all those farmers? We need to talk about the lump of labor fallacy. It's the idea that there's a fixed amount of work in an economy, like a pie, and if a machine takes a slice, there's less left for humans. It sounds intuitive. The economist Wassily Leontief made this exact argument in 1983. He said human labor would go the way of the horse, first diminished, then eliminated. And look, the horse population did collapse by 85% after the car showed up. Seemed like a fair comparison. But this is what actually happened. When mechanization lowered food costs, consumers suddenly had money left over. That surplus got spent on new things: cars, radios, appliances, leisure, and those new industries needed workers, lots of them. While farm employment collapsed from 41% to under 2%, Total private employment in the US increased fourfold. The labor wasn't destroyed, it was upgraded. The plowman became the auto worker, then the mechanic, then eventually the software engineer. Take blacksmiths. In 1910, the census recorded thousands of them. By 1940, that category was decimated, but it was replaced by a vastly larger army of mechanics, machinists, and gas station operators. The car didn't just replace the horse industry, it exploded the entire mobility economy. Because horses have biological limits, speed, stamina, feed requirements, cars don't. Remove the biological constraint, and the whole system scales. And Henry Ford actually understood this. That's why he paid his workers $5 a day, way above market rate. He knew that mass production requires mass consumption. Automation made his workers so productive he could afford to pay them enough to buy the product they were making. The economic loop closed itself. So the tractor didn't destroy prosperity. The tractor created it. But what happens when you try to stop the tractor? Let's go to Britain in 1865. At this point, Britain is the workshop of the world, birthplace of the steam engine, the logical home for the automotive revolution. But there's a problem. The railway lobby and the horse carriage interests don't want competition, so they go to Parliament. And Parliament passes something called the Locomotive Act. You might know it as the Red Flag Act. Here were the rules. Self-propelled vehicles were restricted to 4 miles per hour in the country and 2 miles per hour in towns. And every vehicle needed a crew of 3. A driver, a stoker, and a man walking 60 yards ahead, carrying a red flag to warn pedestrians. The excuse? Safety. These automobiles were dangerous, noisy machines that frightened horses, but the reality is, for 3 decades, British engineers were effectively banned from developing high-speed engines. Meanwhile, in France and Germany, where no red flag laws existed, Daimler and Benz and Panhard were free to experiment, crash, iterate, improve. By the time Britain repealed the law in 1896, the damage was done. France was the world's leading auto manufacturer, the US was ramping up to dominate the 20th century, and Britain, despite all its capital and industrial base, had legislated itself out of the most important industry of the era. That's the thing about innovation. It's path dependent. If you block the early, messy, dangerous phase, you don't get to skip ahead to the mature, safe phase. You just lose the industry to whoever was willing to tolerate the risk. And we're still doing this today. South Korea recently passed something called the Doctor Now Prevention Act, which blocks telemedicine apps from delivering drugs. Same dynamic. New technology threatens incumbents. Incumbents lobby for restrictions citing safety. The result is stagnation and higher costs for everyone. Research comparing regulatory environments across Europe suggests heavy regulation can cost a country between 0.8% and 4% of GDP. That's not nothing. Regulation is a tax on innovation, and it compounds, but the Red Flag Act only delayed progress for a few decades. What happens when you block a technology for centuries? In 1485, Sultan Bayezid II issued a decree banning the printing of books in Arabic script. This ban lasted, with a few exceptions, until 1727. About 240 years. You've heard the arguments before. The scribal class, the calligraphers, they were a powerful guild. They went to the Sultan and said, "We're going to lose our jobs. Do something." And they were right. The printing press would destroy their livelihood. Religious scholars argued the press would introduce errors into sacred texts, corrupt society with misinformation. Advisors suggested waiting to see how the technology affected other societies first, a precautionary principle. So the Ottoman Empire chose safety. They saved the scribes. And during the 2 centuries they relied on hand-copied manuscripts, Europe went through the scientific revolution, the Enlightenment, the early Industrial Revolution, all of it fueled by the rapid, cheap dissemination of information that the printing press made possible. Literacy rates in the Ottoman Empire lagged far behind while they surged in Europe. Technical manuals and scientific papers couldn't circulate, which starved their engineers of the latest knowledge. They protected the jobs of a few thousand calligraphers and impoverished millions by denying them access to what was basically the internet of the 16th century. This is the rebuttal to the lump of labor argument. The Ottoman Empire saved the scribes but lost the future. Okay, let's bring this to the present. There's this chart, sometimes called the chart of the century, that tracks price changes across different sectors from 2000 to 2024. The economy has split in two. On one side, you've got televisions down 97%, software down 70%, toys down 75%, clothing basically flat or negative in real terms. On the other side, you've got hospital services up 220 to 250%, college tuition up around 180%, childcare up over 120%. Same economy, same 24-year period, completely opposite trajectories. So what's going on? The stuff that got cheaper, it's subject to global competition. It's relatively unregulated, and it's embraced automation. A TV manufacturer can't raise prices arbitrarily because someone in Korea will undercut them. They have to make better TVs for less money to survive. That's the tractor effect applied to consumer goods. But healthcare and education, they're heavily regulated, and the key part is they're subsidized in ways that break normal market dynamics. People call this the Bennett hypothesis, named after Secretary of Education William Bennett, who proposed it in 1987. The idea is that federal financial aid doesn't make college cheaper. It makes college more expensive. Because when students can borrow $20,000 as easily as $10,000, with the government guaranteeing the risk, universities have no incentive to cut costs. They compete on prestige instead, nicer dorms, more administrators, lazy rivers, and the Federal Reserve Bank of New York actually tested this. They found that for every dollar of subsidized federal loans, institutions raise tuition by about 60 cents. The subsidy just gets absorbed into higher prices. So in the unregulated sectors, technology drives prices towards zero. In the regulated subsidized sectors, prices spiral upward. Two totally different physics operating in the same economy. Which brings us to AI. What AI represents is a chance to apply the deflationary physics to the inflationary sectors. For the first time, we have technology that can automate cognitive services, teaching, legal analysis, diagnostics, coding, the stuff that's been resistant to productivity gains because, as the economist Baumol pointed out, it takes the same amount of time to perform a Mozart quartet today as it did in 1800. But hey, I might be the cure for Baumol's cost disease. Look at the numbers. Creating a high-quality 3D model for a video game traditionally costs somewhere between $50 and $500 per asset, depending on complexity. A skilled artist working for hours or days, in 2024, AI tools can generate similar assets for less than 3 cents. That's not a 10% improvement. That's a 4 orders of magnitude shift. Building a professional website traditionally costs $5,000 to $25,000 through an agency. AI website builders can do it for a monthly subscription under $100, or effectively pennies if you're running open source models. Some estimates suggest AI is 99.9% more cost effective than human developers for raw code generation. Now, you might be thinking, what about the artists? What about the coders? Aren't their jobs gone? Here is where all the history I just rambled about matters. When the cost of something falls dramatically, we don't consume the same amount with fewer people. We consume vastly more of it. Look at light. In ancient Babylon, producing 1,000 lumen hours of light required dozens of hours of labor to buy the sesame oil. By 1800 with tallow candles, you're down to about 5 hours. By 2000 with grid electricity, minutes. Today with LEDs, a fraction of a second. Since 1700, the price of light has dropped by over 99.9%. Did this destroy the lighting industry? No. We consume incomprehensibly more light now than at any point in history. We light our streets, our offices, our screens. We banished the night. The industry exploded precisely because the technology made it cheap. The same thing is happening in gaming right now. There's an indie game called Suck Up from 2024. It features NPCs powered by large language models. Players use voice chat to persuade AI vampires to let them into houses. The dialogue isn't scripted, it's generated in real time. Infinite variations, a team of 4 developers created a game mechanic. that would have previously required 50 writers and actors, and even then couldn't have been executed dynamically. AI isn't replacing the game industry. It's letting small teams punch way above their weight, creating experiences that simply weren't possible before. Or look at how developers are using AI for vibe coding, rapidly prototyping ideas to find the fun before committing to full production. This lowers the risk of failure, which encourages more experimentation, more startups, more attempts. If coding becomes free, we won't write the same amount of software with 0 people. We'll write 1,000 times more software. We'll embed intelligence into everything. The sector will expand to encompass the entire economy. So here's where we are. We're standing at a fork that looks a lot like Britain in 1865 or the Ottoman Empire in 1485. We have a powerful new general-purpose technology that promises to collapse the cost of intelligence, healthcare, and education, and we have to choose. The red flag path means listening to the modern equivalents of the Horse Association and the Scribes, banning AI in the arts, restricting its use in medicine to protect wages, imposing robot taxes. The historical record is pretty clear about where this leads: stagnation, inflation, and eventually losing economic leadership to whoever chose the other path. The tractor path means embracing the disruption, acknowledging that the transition will be rough for specific sectors, just like it was for the blacksmith, but trusting that the freed up human potential will flow into new, higher order activities we can't fully imagine yet. Look, I'm not saying there's no pain. The blacksmith who had to become a mechanic, that was a real person with a real life who had to learn new skills. That's hard, but the alternative isn't saving their jobs. The alternative is everyone staying poor together. The Ottoman Empire saved the scribes, and it didn't save the Ottoman Empire. The path to prosperity isn't about protecting the status quo, it's about cheaper wheat, cheaper light, and yes, cheaper intelligence. That's the bet. That's always been the bet.